Question 2.1. Study figure 5, a world map showing the distribution of tropical rainforests. So distribution just means where they are. So look at the key, you've got these horizontal lines, you've got this area here, this one here, and this all across these small islands here. So, question 1, which two of the following continents are tropical rainforests found? So as we can see, you don't have these labelled on here, so you've got to know where your continents are. So the answers here, you've got B, South America, and C, Asia. South America is that one, and Asia is this bit here. Next question, study figure 6, an example of a tropical rainforest climate. So we've got months of the year, you've got the temperature, how hot it is, and the amount of rainfall per month. 2.2, what is the annual temperature range shown in figure 6? Annual just means yearly. I think that's obviously all of this from January to December. The range, a little bit of maths here, is just the biggest number take away the smallest number. So if we look at the temperature, not the rainfall, you'll see the biggest number is 29 degrees and the smallest number is 27. So 29 take 27, the answer is D, 2 degrees. 2.3, what is the total annual rainfall shown in figure 6? So you've just got to add up all of these numbers here. It's not asking for the average, just got to add them up. And the answer to 2.3 is B, 2161. 2.4, which one of the following describes the length of the growing season in the tropical rainforest climate? So when are plants and trees, when are they growing? Well, they're growing all year round because, as we've seen from the table, it rains all the time and it's really warm. So perfect conditions for growing. It's not like the temperature gets down to freezing, or it's not like it's really dry for a few months. So the growing season is A, 12 months of the year. 2.5, study this figure 7, a diagram showing the different plant layers in the tropical rainforest. All you've got to do is label the diagram with these 4 labels below. You get 1 mark if you get 2 correct, and 2 marks if you get 3 or 4. We've got from bottom to top, this one's the forest floor, then you've got the under canopy, then you've got the canopy, and then the emergent, which is the very top layer. Question 2.6, got to complete the pie chart for 2020. So the figure, you've got a couple of pie charts already done. The first one is 1980. It's the amount of rainforest versus the area that has been cut down. Now, obviously in 2000, there's a lot more deforested area. So we just got to estimate in the future what is going to happen. So 35% will still be rainforest. So you'll be drawing a line straight down there and then across to 35. And then you'll be shading that in a dark colour sort of rainforest. And then the other area is just whatever you've got left from 35% to 0. And that'll be deforested area. Now, I've seen a few people go wrong on this question before because they've correctly done the 35% line, but then what they do is then they draw another line straight down and go into 65. No, because that is wrong because you have this gap here then that's got nothing on. So just be careful. It's just a line there and a line there, and you've got a section here, forest, and this big section that's left, deforest. 2.7, suggest 2 reasons why the rate of cutting down trees, deforestation, varies between different countries. So on 2 very brief reasons here for 2 marks. First point, looking at the mark scheme, you could say the fact that underdeveloped countries, so LICs or NEEs, they basically can cut down the trees because they need the money, whereas in HICs, we don't really need the money, certainly from cutting down our natural resources. You could also say that if countries have a lot of people, if there is what's called a high population density, then there might be a need to make space for them. We've seen this in parts of the Amazon rainforest in Brazil. Maybe you could say another way of making money is mining or getting minerals. There's a lot of them underneath the ground in rainforest, which could provide money. Lots of different possible answers. Or finally, you could say, in rich countries, HICs, we have the power to conserve our natural world, mainly because, as previously mentioned, we already make money in lots of different ways. So we can afford to protect the environment, and the key word would be conservation or to conserve it, whereas poor countries don't really have such a need to do so because they want to use it for financial gain. 2.8, study figure 9, a diagram showing the nutrient cycle. So what we've got then is a load of circles and a load of arrows. And your 6-mark question is explaining why this diagram is an example of nature's recycling system. So in other words, you've just got to try and explain what is going on and do it in enough detail to get 6 marks. Right. What this basically shows you is where the nutrient is at any one time. So nutrients is just basically the food. So the circles represent the stores, where food or nutrients can be stored. So it can be stored in the soil, it can be stored in the trees and plants, this is called the biomass, or it can be stored in the leaves that have already fallen to the ground, which is called the litter. Now we've got inputs. If you consider this as a system, you've got a few inputs. The main one would be rainfall. Rainfall can carry some nutrients in it and can fall onto the leaves that are on the ground. Now the nutrients then, you've got decomposers. These can be things like bacteria or fungi. They basically break down these dead leaves and their nutrients then as a result goes back into the soil layer. Now from there, plants have got roots, so the nutrients in the soil can be taken in by the trees via their roots. They then can lose their leaves. This is called the littering process. And it basically just repeats itself over and over again. However, nutrients and food can be washed away from an area as well. So if it rains a lot, potentially the dead leaves can be washed away. And all the nutrients that would have been in there passed back onto the tree is gone, and that is called surface runoff. That is when water is on the surface and it's going to wash the leaves away. Or if it rains even more, then maybe the soil can get washed away as well with all of its nutrients. And this key term is called leaching. The nutrients from the soil is washed away. So as long as you explain points like that, you explain what the arrows and the stores are for, that will be sufficient for 6 marks. 2.9, for a hot desert environment or a cold environment you have studied, assess the importance of management strategies used to reduce the risk of environmental damage. So, hot deserts we don't teach you, so don't do that. But cold environment, I would write Alaska just above it. Gives you a focus of the question. So basically, how important is managing Alaska? How important are all the strategies to reduce the impact on nature? Now, for your level 3 answers, your 7, 8s and 9s, students are expected to go beyond just describing the strategies and offer an evaluation of the importance as well. So don't forget that, particularly if you've got a high target grade. Now, what do we know about Alaska then? How is it being managed? Basically, how is it being protected? Well, there's a few different ones, so you are going to have to learn some of these ways. And now, for instance, you've got the International Whaling Commission. These basically monitor how many whales are killed in the waters just north of Alaska every year. Whaling was actually banned in 1986 because too many whales were being killed. So they basically set the limit. Over the last few years, they have allowed more whales, certainly the bowhead species to be killed, because a lot of the local Inuits, this has been their culture for hundreds of years. So they were really annoyed that the Whaling Commission banned them from doing this. So they've sort of relaxed the laws a little bit. What about the ANWR, the ANWR, or the Arctic National Wildlife Refuge? So this is a part of Alaska, and I hope you remember, it's where there is the potential for a lot of oil, but it's a huge national park. Now, most of this area is actually conserved. You can't actually build on it or develop it at all, apart from the 8%, which is at the top, which is where we've seen a lot of people are interested in getting oil out of the ground. But in terms of how important it is, well, just think about a national park. What's going to be there? You're going to have some fantastic physical geography, great scenery, and also loads and loads of animals as well. One of the most common animals would be the big reindeer called the caribou. So obviously, if we're not drilling, if we're not building roads or property developments, then it doesn't impact on the wildlife. If we do, then obviously talk about the knock-on effects. The animals might be disturbed, their migration, their movement patterns might change, and a lot of people around the ANWR depend on the caribou going a certain route every year, because they know where they're going to be, they can kill a few, and that can sustain their population. If the caribou get scared by a lot of machines making a lot of noise, if they go somewhere else, and maybe a lot of these local people might struggle to survive the winter. You've also got a few more. You've got a few global charities. First one is called Greenpeace. NGO, that just stands for a non-governmental organisation. Basically, the government do not pay these to do their job. They are sort of separate. And they go into a lot of countries, in this case Alaska, and they basically campaign to protect the environment. So linked to the previous point, they try and put a ban on oil drilling, particularly in areas of wilderness, and they try to stop people commercially fishing too much and try and make it a bit more sustainable. Or finally, you've got a council, which is a group of people who have the Inuit way of life inbuilt within them, and they sit around a table and they say, right, our culture needs to be protected because loads of people are coming now. You've got the internet, you've got TV. The local people, particularly the children or the young, are starting to see a different way of life, so that they're starting to want to do other things, not what we have traditionally done for hundreds of years. So they sit together and try and say, how can we protect our culture and our way of life? Just for instance, one thing that they did is they argued that the gold mine, a place called Pebble Mill, should not go ahead because it would ruin the environment and that would impact on their way of life. So all of these are the management strategies. We'll explain a few of these, and then ideally you also need to say how important it is. But the focus of this question has got to be on the importance of reducing the risk on the environment. So make sure you link your points to that.